was talking to someone and I had another realisation yet again how really important it is for people to gather and share esoteric knowledge so that we pass it on to other people, because it's actually, if we don't, it dies out, and it has through history. So, and there's been times when that has held the civilization back. So I'm hoping, and I know that there are, and I know some of you go to other groups too, that there are little groups all through Brisbane meeting and passing on this information through the alternative underground and all sorts of things. But it's really important, and I'm so glad that you're here to take part in that on my journey and all of our journeys together. Jamie's had a lifetime of experiences, so I'm going to pass him over to the mic over to you. No, don't take to him so he can share the information he's brought today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hello, welcome everyone. So for all of you that haven't been here before, my name's Jamie Spooner, and I'll be discussing with you today some of the forces that can influence our life, that do tend to pervade our life on everyday levels, from a mental, emotional, physical and spiritual point of view. We can quite often find ourselves being distressed and taken away from our centre and wondering what's influencing our lives and the lives of other people. So last time I was here and I spoke, I gave a bit of a background of my experiences, and that started from when I was about around three, where I started to have experiences with spirit and other beings that stepped in and started to influence my life. And that gave me, opened up an opportunity from that young age with my parents and my mum and my grandmother exposing themselves and messing around with the Ouija and occult practices, started to bring other spirits and entities into my realm and my energy fields. And as I grew up, they started to have more of an influence. One of the things that can play a really important role in our lives in terms of staying integral and safe is that we maintain a healthy body. And one of the things that can actually compromise us is drugs and alcohol. Low vibrational places that we can go to, pubs, bars, other unseemly places that have a lot of low vibrational energy, thought forms, emotional forms, they can actually come in and attach to us without us knowing. So if we compromise ourselves energetically, if we've had trauma, a lot of really hard emotional situations where we've had loss and grief, anger, violence, even to the extreme where people can be sexually violated, all of those things can actually cause rips and holes and tears in the auric field and in the chakras, which then allow these entities and forces to step in. Most of us have some of these influences in our energetic fields. And as I described last time, I gave an analogy where Christ was walking to Calvary chained, and if you could see him being psychically or clairvoyantly, you would see the demons that were actually chained walking beside him. And when that was described to me, it gave me a lot of insight in terms of the function and the role that these forces actually play in helping us evolve and grow, and also the purpose for them being able to move out of darkness and into the light. So it serves two worlds. It's not like the old stories in the movies and the adages where these forces are just out there to wreak complete havoc and destruction in our lives. They actually do serve a purpose for us. So what I would like to talk about today a little bit further is open that up and actually give a bit more of a background and understanding of what these forces are. I know I just touched on them last time. So I've prepared some content here. It's written content, so I'll try and make it as interesting as I can while I'm actually reading from that and engaging you, and as make it as informative as possible. During the break and afterwards, I'm quite happy to open that up and discuss that and take some questions with you all as well. And if you'd like to follow that up further with me and would like further information, I'm happy to provide that to you as well. One of the last things that I want to discuss with you after the break today is just some simple psychic awareness and techniques that you can be using. Not everyone's going to be stepping into this type of world, and it's been introduced to me, and I'm now under tutelage and studying how to work with these energies and forces. So it's pertinent that I'm here today again discussing this and sharing this information with you all, but I want to thank you all for being here today and giving me the opportunity to do so. Alright, so one of the first things that we want to start looking at are some of the forces and how they actually influence us. And I touched on it last meeting in terms of the creatures, dark lords, dark entities. Alright, and these forces play a very specific role. And as I'm about to introduce to you what these forces are and the roles that they play. So many of these forces are actually driven from the subconscious part of our mind, and they access that subconscious part. When we've fractured and that soul part of us is still connected through the silver cord, but through that fracture we can allow that influence to step in. So many people think of only the conscious part of themselves, but this is really like just the top of the froth on a glass of beer. What lies underneath the subconscious is the superconscious. And this part is the limitless, both in power and potentiality. If you give constant recognition to all that is in you, your faith and confidence will blossom. Know that you have something within you, a divine spark, your connection to your higher self. That which is greater than any obstacle, circumstance or difficulty that you could possibly meet. Then in full faith, this greater essence, you can proceed with your work. And part of the development and understanding is calling upon this, not only just with the angels and the other beings that we can use in assistance to work with and against these forces and clearing them and helping them actually return to their path, right? We always have that source that we can return to, which is our highest path of guidance, our highest connection. We can always start there and call on that. So we have two bodies. We have a mental body. We have several, but we have a mental and emotional body that tend to be influenced the most by these forces. Alright, so the conscious mind that we use every day in the world, alright, the abstract mind, which is our interior life from the subconscious part of who we are. Alright, so from there, the abstract mind can influence us and the conscious mind to such a degree that its content and it holds, which is limitless, can filter in and to influence the conscious mind. So the forces that play upon the surface of the mind can be changed and turned from their course by almost any outside influence. So what we would look at as an outside influence is one of these dark forces, for example. So people who have mental illness, you would see 90% of the people that are in mental institutions, if these issues were addressed from this point of view, they would recover and become whole again. Western medicine doesn't treat mental illness from this metaphysical perspective. Isn't that interesting, right? Highly suggestive that if we started working metaphysically with people who have mental illness in mental institutions, that we could cure them from that perspective. So this is never true from the currents that come through the subconscious levels. Anything that is accepted by the mental undercurrents will be seen through to a finish regardless of external circumstances or conditions. And it is within this difficulty that the course of these currents can be changed when once they begin to work out through the clearing work. So it is the subconscious that we must understand to act upon. If we want the power of mind to work with full capacity and produce the greatest measure possible for the healing and clearing results desired. In defining the subconscious mind, it is first necessary to state that it's not a separate mind. There are not two minds, there is only one mind in man, but it has numerous levels: the conscious, subconscious, and supraconscious. That's the level of where the masters operate, by the way. And that word's not thrown around too much, but on my research I come across that and I thought I'd introduce that to you. In this connection, it's interesting to learn that there are a number of things in the human system usually looked upon as natural and inevitable. They are simply the results misdirected subconscious training in the past. We frequently speak of human weakness as natural, but weakness is never natural. Although it may appear, it is inevitable the result of imperfect conscious or in subconscious action and training. So the reason I'm touching on this to begin with at the conscious level and subconscious level is that it has a karmic implication. Alright, and when we're able to actually unpack the two and start to operate consciously through both levels, we'll actually start to move into a place of awareness and address the influences and forces that are working in both planes. And they relate to both the mental and emotional bodies primarily. So it can be just as readily trained, however, to produce great physical strength and greater mental capacity at 90 than we possess at 30 or 40. Thus it has been predicted that a new race or superior race may appear upon this planet when people begin to understand this natural law. Whenever you say that you are tired and permit the feeling to sink into the subconscious, you will almost at once be more tired. Whenever you feel sick and permit that feeling to enter the subconscious, you will always feel worse. So whenever we suggest that we're under the influence of an entity or a force, we are opening the door and the gateway and the energetic path to sustain a stronger, more powerful connection with us. Conscious acknowledgement is one thing, but reinforcement from a place of weakness, an underdeveloped state of being, allows the influence then to have a greater control over us. Alright, so we should never go into sickness, though that does not mean that we should continue to work as hard as usual as we're not feeling well, or cause the mind and body to continue their usual activities. When we find it necessary, we should give ourselves complete rest, but we should never give in to the feelings of sickness. And that sickness can relate to being influenced. I feel this is really pertinent to set up this premise before we actually go into the next part of what I'll be discussing, to understand that if you are experiencing influences that are not your own, you then have a place or a point of reference to actually start working out from. It gives you a point of strength and confidence to know that you can shift these things. When you feel tired or depressed, do not admit it, but turn your attention at once to something that is spiritual, something that will completely turn your minds towards the pleasing, the more desirable, or the ideal. Persist in the feelings the way you want to feel, and permit only wholesome feelings to enter the subconscious. Thus the wholesome feelings will live and grow, and after a while your power to feel good at all times will have become so strong that you can put out of the way any adverse feeling that may threaten you at any time. So I find that's really interesting. From my experience in the past, everything that I was being influenced by I thought was my own. I had no point of reference to start to reclaim my power and my sovereignty. And after being overrun by many of these forces, I had no individual perspective of who I was anymore. I had no reference, no baseline. And we all go through each day feeling the way we do, being influenced and being pulled. We're up and down emotionally. Our thoughts can go a million miles an hour. We can go to a lot of different places with how we are. From one moment being calm and centered to the next being irrational, upset, nervous. You know, how much of that is our own? And how much of that is actually being influenced from other forces around us?
How do you know?
And this is what we're going to get to. Great question. Good questions to ask, right? Especially if you're someone who is afflicted a lot with a mind that doesn't settle or slow. Irrational thoughts lead to irrational emotions, which can lead to irrational behaviour. You're then setting up an energy around you that is an open door to invite these forces in. Like I said, most of us do have an influence or influences from forces around us. Some of them are not so bad. They play a very minor role in terms of helping us develop and grow spiritually. Others can really step in at the highest level, like you see in mental institutions where people are completely overrun, where people have snap and they run down the street and all of a sudden they're murdering people. At the highest level, they are under that influence. So I'll just have prepared a list here of some of the forces and the roles that they play. So, ghosts, I'm sure you all have heard of ghosts being here. There's two distinct descriptions of what I've found here. Initially, with a ghost, there's the astral shell that's left behind. Okay, that you'll see, and it's interesting with the astral shell because a lot of other entities or forces can step into the astral shell and actually present as the person who was incarnate at one point, which is interesting, right? Because anyone that's done mediumship and has had a connection, evidential mediumship thinks that, hey, well, this is the loved one that's passed over. Not entirely true all the time. There are other beings and forces that can step into the remaining astral shell of an incarnate person and impose themselves as that person. So discernment here is really, really important, and evidence is really important as well. Sometimes these astral shells, they can be animated by unscrupulous persons or beings with nefarious purposes. The other description of a ghost involves someone who's passed over but has left an emotional shadow on the astral plane. The ghost lives out the person's emotional life, living the same thing over and over again for maybe hundreds of years until the energy has dissipated. So we can see that the remnants of an incarnate person is not so much the essence of the spirit or the soul in spirit, it's actually an imprint through the etheric body, astrally, mentally or emotionally. And that shell can remain for quite a long time. And it also can be influenced by other spirits and beings. So sometimes we can encounter something that we believe is someone that's passed over, and that's not who they are. So again, learning to discern that, I mean, is quite interesting how to do that. But again, we should be asking the question and looking for the evidence to prove it is that person that was actually incarnate and they have crossed over, and it is them in essence that is trying to communicate with us. Discarnate beings, I touched on that last time I was here. So these discarnate beings, on the other hand, are those for some reason didn't go through the tunnel of light and that would have appeared after they died. So discarnate beings are in limbo. They become lost, and they are earthbound spirits, and they take the energy from the living. They are in desperate need of us to help show them the way to return to the light. So these discarnate beings can be quite nefarious, quite influential on people, and create a lot of problems mentally for people. They'll start there where people start to hear the voices and thoughts that aren't their own. And the stronger they get and the more influence that they have over the individual, they start to shadow that person. And a person starts to think and then behave in ways that they can't recognise or understand why they're doing it. And I'm sure everyone would have heard, I don't know why I do these things, but I just do. Just acting out of the blue in a way that's totally not like the person at all. Most discarnates choose to stay here reluctant to the progress in their life travels, out of fear. The reason why a person remains as a discarnate being hiding among the living are numerous, but every one of those reasons for remaining earthbound are rooted somewhere in fear. It is fear that causes emotional turmoil, mistaken thinking, and at times desperation for relief. It is also fear, albeit subtle in form, that causes a person to remain behind with family or friends, to watch over them out of love or concern. This is not necessary. The person's guardian angel or guides have been assigned to do that. But nonetheless, the incarnate soul or spirit that's been here feels that that's necessary. That fear is binding them to moving on. I touched on creatures last time, and some of these creatures, they take on the forms of like the creatures we see in life every day from different animals. They range in symbolism, so they speak really highly symbolically to us. From insects and snakes, reptiles, monkeys, sheep, goats. I don't know if any of you have seen a picture of Christ, but the way that a lamb can be laid across somebody's body in a position is very symbolic of the influence that creature has, whether it's working from the light or whether it's actually working from a more shadowy, darker influence. So when you have the lamb that's laid across the shoulders of an individual, that shows that person is Christed and connected to the light. Between the legs has quite the opposite, and they're actually influencing from a darker place. Again, speaking very symbolically, these creatures will give you the evidence and show you how they're influencing an individual. So these creatures may be found living in the astral body of a person and draining the energy from the person to keep themselves alive. So it becomes a two-way exchange. And the word I'm looking for right now is there's creatures or beings out there on the earth plane that actually need another form of life to sustain their own life. Symbiotic relationship, I believe it is. Parasites. Yeah. So you guys get that, right? So we have this symbiotic relationship happening with creatures. To sustain their form astrally, they need a connection with us energetically. Does that make sense? Their attitude is one of survival, and their host's energy field is where they choose to live because the energy vibration is similar or has been similar. They often incite a person to experience negative emotions to keep their energies preferable to their field of operation. They have no sense of justice or right or wrong. They merely exist and want to continue to exist. So then I've moved on to negative thought forms and their creations. I touched on this last time in terms of projections, projectiles, and the need for people that are on the journey, but not just spiritual beings, but the awareness and the power of the thoughts that we create and how we actually direct them at people. They can actually become their own entity and their own consciousness, and they can have that influence over people here on the earth plane. Magicians, for an example, that are working not so much for the light and the darker side of things, conjure all of these thought forms up and use them very powerfully to disrupt people's lives. At the highest levels, they will work in with politicians and people of great influence to control the masses with mass thought forms. So when you see revolutions, people protesting, it's interesting if you stand back and watch what happens is that everyone gets overrun by a collective thought form. And whether they're protesting for justice and peace or whether they're protesting for hate and violence, they're overrun by the collective energy of one thought form that's projected out towards another group of people. Very, very powerful. And once you step into that, you're then influenced by it. Your emotions change, your thoughts change, and you're running with that energetic field of vibration and that thought influence. Could you imagine what happens on the other side if you have a collective of entities and forces that are actually working to do the same thing? How do we deal with that? What do we do? So these negative thought forms and their creations, there's no exaggeration in the expression what we think we create. Continual mental energy exerted towards an area will eventually bring the idea to life. So you all know what you think you create. The rule of manifestation and creation. Such a life is called a thought form. We will not concern ourselves with the positive thought forms as we are having them around, and they are responsible for the positive vibrations that keep us strong and healthy. However, the negative ones can give us a world of trouble. For example, a parent may have the thought about his child, "You'll never be any good." And that thought form within the child, if it's continually reinforced, crystallizes within the astral body, mentally and emotionally. And once it's set up in the astral body, we have a belief system that's influenced from the outside of us, coming back in and affecting us mentally and emotionally. I'm never good enough. But that's really not the energy of who you are, but it's now the energy that's been created and influencing who you think you are. But it's been reinforced by a thought form from your parents. And I'm sure each and every one of us have heard something in our lives that's reinforced a belief system and an energy that's made us think and feel something about ourselves that's not good. So these, over the years, the thought grows into a living energy that's directed at the child, particularly if the child doesn't do and act according to the wishes of the parent. This then becomes attached to the child's energy field, as I've just explained. As the child grows to become an adult, he believes and therefore creates a life supporting the concept of being no good. Even though he may not know why, as the thought form projected from his physical parent has melded into part of his energy structure and has actually become part of him. Clairvoyantly seeing, this thought form hangs in the energy field like a black or grey cloud and prohibits the expression of more positive energy. And that's interesting when we talk about prohibition of positive energy. How many of us get up from day to day and feel tired, lethargic, drained, that we have excessive thinking, over-emotional feelings, at some point we don't feel whole and integral, that we're hemorrhaging energy, that we have a field of energy that is influenced by not only these thought forms that have been created by spoken word from people that we know, but collectively again from forces outside of us that have stepped in to work collaboratively to help us evolve and grow. It's very, very significant if we fluctuate in energy to start looking and addressing that possibly some of these things are occurring in our fields of energy. So I'll speak about discarnate earthbound entities now. So the death experience of such is such that a person exits his physical body through the severance of the silver cord. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the silver cord. A lot of you, I'm not sure if you understand how most of us feel like the cord, or the silver cord comes from the centre of the heart. We actually have both. The silver cord enters from the front and the back and connects us at a parallel connection. So we can actually have forces that step in and influence from the back energetically and spiritually through that cord and through the front. If that silver cord is disrupted, right, we are then left. If we're astrally speaking, someone that leaves their body and is astrally travelling, if that silver cord is disrupted or broken, we could potentially be lost to other worlds and dimensions. And returning is the possibility of returning back to our body and to our soul structure has been severely compromised. So waiting to greet the discarnate earthbound entities are either angelic beings or deceased loved ones who stand with him in a field of light. The light is believed to be somewhere within the middle of the astral plane. From there, the deceased goes on to one of seven planes of the astral dimensions that vibrates with his best level of consciousness. Now that's interesting to note too. When I had put this in here and read that, as we vibrate and evolve here on the earth plane, when we cross over, it matches. And as I've just spoken of, the 7 levels primarily. So the idea of spiritual evolution and growth through learning the virtues and developing, right, is that as we increase that vibration here on the earth plane in the physical body, we actually attain that vibration in spirit. So the more service we do to others, for others, the more kindness and peace, love that we show to others and to ourselves, the more we start to fall away from the lower vibrations and how we treat people, the more freedom that we obtain and the more potential we actually can attain to moving up through the astral worlds and vibration of consciousness. So it's a dualistic experience. And to understand that, these discarnated earthbound entities don't quite understand the process of that. So these are the ones that really do play a lot of havoc with people, but they're the ones that really do need a lot of help too in moving on. From there, the deceased goes on to one of the seven planes like I've explained. So it's vibrating at his level of consciousness. A very low consciousness would go to one of the lower regions with like-minded people, whereas a person with a very high spiritual vibration would either enter one of the higher astral planes. And it's interesting to note on that too, that if you had someone that was aware of the power of dark magic and then employed someone to serve that in on the physical plane in terms of wealth, riches, power, corruption, when they cross over, if that individual that's given them the powers to do that was under the influence of a Dark Lord, they would then move into that plane in spirit and then have to serve out their time karmically under the influence of that Dark Lord. How terrifying is that? You've signed on a contract to go and work under this Dark Lord. And it's a bit like what Christ teaches and we speak about in the Bible. When I learned that, I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Because really, all the treasures in the world that Satan offered Christ, or the spiritual masters, and tempted them into that would have fallen under a contract of a Dark Lord or a Dark Master spiritually. And then your soul, your spirit, would have had to have served out that time karmically. And the interesting thing around this too is depending on the time that you spend actually cleaning up all that karma and serving that Dark Lord, every potential there for you to be lost to your essence and your light could occur. So you could actually lose all remembrance of who you are, the light in you, and continue to then completely serve that Dark Lord and the agenda that he has. So higher level stuff there, when you get people signing on and working with these forces and powers at the top echelons, they know exactly what's going on. And they know what they're signing on for, right? But the consequences spiritually, when you cross over, you're left to then play out that role. So these newly discarnate beings, or this being lives within his astral body until it eventually wears away, after which he incarnates and starts the process again. Or living now only in his mental body, retires to the mental planes. This cycle continues until he has spiritually progressed to the point of no longer needing to experience physical life as he has fulfilled his karmic cycle and point of obligation. So then he's ready for a new life path and point of instruction to work through a new set of karmic obligations and life patterns. Unfortunately, this doesn't always turn out to be this way. The light is always there at a person's death, but for numerous reasons a person might not enter it but choose to reside within his astral or etheric body on the earth plane. In the days of Atlantis, the etheric body and some of the astral bodies were destroyed to prevent such happenings, which is really interesting. Didn't give themselves the opportunity to then be caught up in that karmic pattern and have to learn that. They were trying to negate that, but part of what happened with Atlantis was that they became too powerful to understand the consequences of what they were doing on those levels. I spoke about curses last time I was here, just touched on them and how we can actually curse people through how we speak and how we think. And some of you may remember that. And that some of the words that we use intentionally to curse people can actually result in projectiles. I can do that, or people can do that, just purely with their thought forms. If I sat intently and thought about you, a person strong enough, I could create a form of energy that could penetrate your aura and harm you. And I can continually do it over and over and over again. The really interesting thing about this, if I was to choose to do that and being aware of everything that I do know, the karmic penalty and repercussions from this would be huge. The mess I would have to clean up once I've crossed over would be really, really bad, right? Yeah.
What if I wasn't afraid? If you tried to send a curse to me, I had absolutely no fear.
Yeah.
What happens?
So the vibration of fear, like I've just described with fears, that's a good question. So you would become more resistant.
I suspect that, yes.
Yeah, you would become more resistant. It's a bit like, so when I get up every day and I throw a cloak over me, I use a certain colour and a vibration and intention to do that. The cloak's programmed. Alright, so depending on your fear, and you're just sitting in pure resistance of fear, that in itself may still attract that to you. Alright, so there's a very specific instruction that you would be using, right, to be negating the psychic attack, the thought form or the emotional energy. Quite possibly, fearlessness could resist that, but for how long? I feel it needs to be coupled with other things. Earth plane 3D reality is all about polarization, plus and negative draw together, okay? We see that through electricity. Spirit realm, no. It's the plus and plus that draw together. Alright, so we polarize in spirit through the likeness, and in this plane, on the earth plane, through the opposite poles. So the interesting thing is if you have love and fear, they can exist in both realms simultaneously on the earth plane. Right? So how much conscious attention and focus and power does it require to sustain that level of effort energetically? What does your life look like in terms of that? Now, I can give you a really quick, brief example of some people who've mastered that. Look at the monks, the priests, the masters, their path and their life and their practice was completely immersed and revolved around all of that practice. Meditative prayer, service, everything they did embodied that higher vibration of love. And the power that they actually accrued through that, eventually right down to their RNA and their DNA, right, was tapped into the highest source that they were permissibly can work from. So the fear vibration had less of an influence to then step in and magnetize from spirit any lower vibrations that can influence them that we were discussing today, but any thought form projections that were pushed against them. As we step down through the planes, the vibration gets denser and heavier, and it polarizes. And in terms of the discussion that we're having today, how these forces play out in the lower planes closest to the earth plane. As we step up through the planes of existence and the 7 levels that I've described in terms of the evolution of the spirit, right, the vibration becomes more pure, love vibration, more light vibration, a higher consciousness awareness. But in terms of what our experience here is on the earth plane today, we are very much pulled from love and fear all the time. And our spiritual progression and development is to actually experience that. So you will have moments of love and strength and power, and you'll have moments of fear and weakness and powerlessness. You always swing between both. So I spoke about curses last time, and initially we find out I spoke about Aboriginal elders and curses on the land.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
Alright, so, and these from the Aboriginal spirits that are overseeing the land that are not particularly happy with the way that we've dealt with the land in terms of their sacred rights and honouring them. Okay, so, and these beings are in despair and they're really unhappy. And some of the curses that they actually place on people are in relationship to how we've treated the land and how we're living on the land and we're not honouring them. And some of what we perhaps could have done or are doing now is that we use some of the elders to actually gain permission to work and live on the land in respect to their traditions and their cultures, and that would be honouring them in spirit. And as I spoke about in last group, I had a friend who was cursed by an Aboriginal spirit where I used to live, and my mother too. And the Aboriginal spirits that are present there in that land are very displeased with how people are using the land and living there. So part of this is about speaking with these beings and asking for forgiveness on behalf of the people who've developed the land, because they had no idea it was sacred. Explaining that these people who built on the land would take care of it as if it was prepared to bless the land on their behalf. These beings are usually resigned to the fact, often giving his blessings. At other times the problem may occur and you'll have to keep asking how the being would like the situation addressed so that he can lift the curse on the land of people, on the people. Once you've found this agreement, you're connecting with Archangel Michael and asking him to assist the being back to his own people where he can continue on his next evolutionary step. So that part there is speaking from the intermediary who's doing the clearing work. So what Archangel Michael does once you've asked him in is that he actually places the being or the elder in a bubble of light, and you should be able to watch, for anyone who's clairvoyant was doing the work, watch him rejoin his circle of elders and he'll be welcomed back home. So you're thanking Archangel Michael for his assistance, and then from there the person doing the clearing work checks the land to see the curse has been lifted and for any other negative influences that are perhaps on the land or that are affecting people living there. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting when we start to talk about the dark forces, the dark angels, dark brothers, Lucifer. For some of you that, how they've glorified that through the movies and made it something that everyone perhaps aspires to, that would like to go down that path and worship. I would highly recommend that you leave that stuff alone. So the dark or the dark angels. So we'll have a look at these beings from the angelic realm These are the most feared and possibly misunderstood beings within our planetary system. They are also referred to as dark forces. Sometimes they are referred to as devils or demons, but these are slightly different to the dark forces and have their own hierarchic structure, such as barons, earls, knights. Just as there is a hierarchy of angelic beings, so there is a hierarchy of demonic beings. As above, so below. The reflection is so accurate. So we do know that they are of the angelic realm. They are created beings, and all created beings have a spark of light within them, whether they are dark or light. Lucifer is believed to be the angel of light. Lucifer, sometimes called the light bearer, agreed to illuminate the earth as a special assignment. He's only mentioned once in the King James version of the Bible, in allegory referring to the king of Babylon. Lucifer is another name for Venus, the morning and evening star. He is not connected with Satan or the devil. The story of Lucifer is representative of a Babylon or Hebrew star myth similar to the Greek legend of Phaethon. Which is interesting too, in my research with Lucifer, what they called the Luciferic Rebellion. And he was actually an overseer of the star system here in terms of its evolution at one point. If you were to refer a specific book, they talk about that in terms of him and a third of the angels that were overseeing the evolution of this system, which then rebelled because they were not happy with the pain and suffering of the created beings on the earth plane. He actually wanted something different for us than what was actually happening. And everything had been re-engineered in terms of the knowledge and perhaps the truth and wisdom that came from that. Further research into that I would highly suggest that if you have any interest in understanding the role that Lucifer has played in the unfoldment and development of us here on the earth plane. The Dark Brothers and their true purpose, the more we want to learn or experience, the more they exert their influence over us. They push us forward. If they did not, we would stagnate. Hence the chains in spirit. They assist us to take our next evolutionary steps as they assist us to take an initiation. At birth, each of one of us is endowed with a certain number of these dark energies. Wow. How many of you thought that you don't have any of these going on? Guess what? So we've contracted this in to our evolution. Now we could choose then with that knowledge, if we choose to accept that as something as true, we could then quite easily fall into fear and allow that then to intensify our decision and our experience here on the plane and not let it help us develop and evolve. Or we could move into love and actually use that information to help us grow and understand the purpose and the function of what these forces are doing with us and for us, and perhaps against us at some point. So throughout our lives we may be able to clear some or transmute some of these energies. Sometimes we may acquire more depending on our lifestyle or consciousness. So with the clearing work that I had done a few months ago, it was then further explained to me that some of the forces and influences are still in play, are there because they cannot be cleared. The person that did the work for me was not allowed to do that part of the clearing work under instruction that they were still to remain in play. And to what point of my understanding and at what point of play they're still in play, I am subtly aware of the influences that they have on me emotionally and mentally and physically, because I can still see that I'm developing and growing through those thoughts and feelings and those influences that are separate from me but have a very intimate role in how I think and feel, choose and act. And I do not fear them, but just recognise that they're there. And you can liken some of those influences to things that are opposite of the virtues. We're all pulled in ways of experience that are not so wholesome and virtuous. I like to think as we get older, they do start to fall away and our behaviour or our thinking towards others changes. But this is where some of the influences on us can come from there. So some of the extremes, you might see people with extreme alcohol addictions or people with extreme sexual addictions. These are not just generated from within the individual person, they are actually influenced by other forces and energies that have stepped in. And you might find for the young female that has a problem with this, she was sexually violated, that's then caused a trauma and a rip in her energetic field, which has allowed these influences to step in and magnify that what's already there. But by contract, she's come in to learn about this. So this is where we have the power and the control over the fear through knowledge, is to see and understand what's really going on when we step out, rather than judge what's happening. It's inquiry, it's intelligent evaluation, investigation, research, constantly looking at it from that point of view. How many of us drop in and go, the victim mindset and the poverty mindset and the fear mindset, then the truth of that actual experience and what the soul's learning and why that's happening is lost.
Can I ask something about alcohol? You're talking about alcohol.
Sure.
I always thought that alcohol and hard drugs actually opened the aura to allow entities in. So are you saying they came first, or the alcohol and drugs came first?
So when you say opened the aura and the consciousness, so if we look at it in terms of vibration, what sort of drugs are you referring to?
No, I'm not talking about cannabis. I'm talking about hard drugs, lots of heroin, cocaine, ice, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And alcohol.
Yeah. Are you saying that that's opening it up for a beneficial experience, or no? No. And
That's inviting.
it is. Yes, it exactly. That's what I pointed to last time when I was here, and pointing to now. It does. So what actually happens is, to recap quickly, is when we take on a lower vibration of any form of substance that causes damage to the energetic field, right? It will cause pinholes, tears, rips. It opens up each layer of our energetic bodies, from the etheric to the emotional, mental, causal body. You can go right up. So there's an individual that I was having a discussion with that at the 7th level, where an influence had stepped in. And this could be around not just drugs and alcohol, any sort of energy that creates severe trauma energetically, we then open up. And so the need to see somebody who can do the work around clearing and healing is really important. But primarily and most commonly, we will see it through an addiction of some sort. And the vibrational nature of drugs and alcohol compromise us the most, and very quickly. Yeah.
Just to point on the alcohol, apparently the word alcohol comes from al-ghul, which is a pre-Islamic
Yes.
term, and that means to allow ghouls, effectively, which are...
Absolutely. Yeah. And how many people have been influenced when they get too drunk that then they lose themselves and become someone they're not?
Yeah.
So what happens? Is that you, or is that something else that's influencing you? So being endowed with a certain number of these energies that we all do have when we come in, it's contractual, it's part of our soul growth and spiritual evolution. It's something not to fear. It's to open it up and realise how they're actually playing a role in us, in our spiritual development. All right, so some of these we can clear and transmute them once we become aware of them. You know, if you have someone that's a really powerful psychic or healer that can actually step in and see, has awareness of this type of stuff, you know, I'd recommend having, getting them to sit down and have a discussion. Again, approaching this from a point of love and empowerment, not fear. And it's really advantage to you to be able to do that. So once you understand that what these influences are, you can then start to work with them and clear them at the level that you're energetically at with your progression and development. So when at such times it comes that we think and live in a sacred space, initiating sacred events, then we have grown beyond the power that the Dark Ones have over us. Remember, in the history of our human lives, we've not always been light workers. There would have been a time where we've been under a strong pull of darkness. By our will, we have grown beyond this influence, and because of the experience, have actually developed many abilities that we would otherwise not have. Because the energy parent, higher soul, still has other facets out, and we are not yet completely merged into the oneness of our being, the Dark Ones still serve a purpose. And we still attract the influence into our lives through negative thinking, drugs, alcohol, and other such circumstances. Excuse me. So then I'll move on to obsession and possession. Are these real? So this is a situation where the dark forces totally take over an individual. And a lot of people question, is this real? Does it happen? Yes to both of those. Obsession and or possession can be in any and all of the energetic bodies, as well as the physical body. We most commonly see it step right down into the physical. And so for the person that's doing the clearing work, needs to scan and ascertain which bodies are affected to remove all the attachments and projectiles from these. And if the manifestation is physical, the person will often experience pain and disease. If the emotional or mental bodies of the person, they may experience insanity or become a psychopathic murderer. Most people in mental institutions would have at least an 80% cure if these dark forces were removed, as I've touched on. 80%, according to the person that teaches this.
Probably prison too.
Oh yeah, isn't that interesting, right? Massive. What would it look like if we started approaching our healing from this place? Rather than just looking at the physical body and what's involved with that. What if we all started to become metaphysicians in our own right and started addressing these problems in that realm? One of the simplest ways, by the way, that we can do this is through very simple alchemy, sacred prayer. If you don't know about prayer being that, it's huge and very, very powerful. Sacred prayer and alchemy. It's been taught through the ages. That's why we've been given that as a gift. It works. The power of belief and intent, you use it as alchemy. Not just as a prayer that people wish and hope for. You get serious about what you're doing and you become an alchemist and you start working with that prayer that way. So, dark force and discarnate attachments. Every adult you meet has some dark forces and discarnate attachments, some more than others. Unless the attachments have been removed, if you associate among lower vibrations by drinking alcohol and taking drugs, you are obviously bringing yourself into their field of operation. So stay out of bars.
Drink water.
Oh my God. So it took me a long time to work that one out. You can imagine, right? So, but yeah, I would quite often find that, depending on the level of alcohol that I drank, but the next day, the people that I was around, how sick I actually felt, not just from the alcohol, but I was energetically poisoned. Yeah. So it wasn't just the alcohol, but I didn't know. But I mean, I'd have bouts of terrible anxiety and depression and anger and confusion. And being empathic, not only was it I had surrogated a room full of people's sick and diseased energy. And I've gone home with this cloud of muck in my energy fields, gone, hey, this is great, I'm pissed, I feel great, pass out, wake up next day and I want to die. So being really super aware of our surroundings and where we go and the people that are there constantly in those environments. Seek to find yourself and place yourself in high vibrational communities, situations, as much as you possibly can. This will assist you in actually helping recover and heal and stay more whole integrally as well. If you are working through stuff that people do and having these influences, if anything that you are experiencing is not of yourself, that's the time to start questioning what is influencing me and my life. So these are the main places where the entity's attachment's most likely to occur. So taking drugs or mixing with other drug takers, hanging out in bars, drunkenness and prostitution or any other low energy haunts are most common places and situations that attract these types of energies. There are also those who deal in Satanism, black magic, negative witchcraft, voodooism and vampirism, including incubi and succubi. By the way, those two influences are both a male and a female dark force or energy that actually attacks one or the other. So when I explained from my other experience how a young man I was staying with, Danny, who was being influenced by a succubi, it was one of the dark forces that come up from the earth called Lilith that was actually attacking him physically, and he was bleeding from very private parts of his body. And when friends of mine did the clearing, they ascertained that that was the energy that was actually causing him the physical harm. Powerful stuff. A portal had opened up where his house was built. People who dabble in such areas are frequently drawn into them, and they have a very difficult time getting out. One of the reasons is that their attachments have become so strong through the association of such places that the subconscious influence of these attachments overwhelms their better judgment and willpower. So, like I said, with the alcohol and the ghouls that overrule our subconscious part of our mind, we lose ourselves. In the case of ordinary people, or even those who are consciously striving towards spiritual growth, the number of these attachments they have still depends on their history, regardless of their present spiritual striving. Take, for example, a person who's striving for spiritual growth, and one that raises the consciousness and vibrations through spiritual practice and disciplines. That one's earthbound attachments may also be open for this growth. Who would have imagined that? Interesting, right? So here I am, continuing to do what I'm doing, and the energies and forces that are still in play in my life have the opportunity to progress and evolve through from that place. Who would have thought?
Good thought, yeah.
It is a good one, right? Who would have thought that they get the opportunity to do that? Everyone would have thought, no. You're coming from a bad place, you're dark, you're this, you're that, there's our judgment. You guys don't get the opportunity.
Get out of it, yeah.
They actually do. Which brings the love back into this as well, that not only for us here on the earth plane, the love is available for these people in spirit too, these beings and these entities as well. All seeking that point of light and return to that point, that wholeness and that oneness. So this would be the case with attached dark forces. However, these dark angels' purposes is to hold all things in darkness. So they have no intention of letting anyone growing spiritually. In fact, they often attack those who hinder their work. For this reason, light workers are frequently targets of the dark forces. This is why so many people will tell you to surround yourself with the light before doing interdimensional work. How many of us walk out the front door and chuck a white ball of light on us around us every day? Or a cloak? How many of you do that? How many feel the need to? Yeah, we're not doing the interdimensional work, but just here, little 3D Earth. How many of you feel the need to throw the protection on?
No, but I will.
It's interesting, you know, just monitor your moments through your day. Being at the shops, or you might find that you'll be around people that make you feel unwell or ill. Headaches, body pains, things that are not normally your own. Pay attention to those things, because they're psychic energies that definitely are coming in and influencing you. And if you have the same vibration, the like-like connection happens, and you've picked up on that energy that's then made you feel the way you feel. So this is a good idea. You can surround yourself with the white light, the violet flame, wear a cross, or ask the Master Jesus to protect you, or ask Archangel Michael to stand with his legion of angelic helpers. I use 4 warrior angels around my room, and they set up a grid of energy that's like a sphere that goes all the way around my room, and I program that sphere to stay in place for a period of time. And then within that I use other angelic symbols around my door, and I code energy around me so I don't have these random lower vibrational forces and influences that come passing through my room, my sanctuary, that then disrupt me. And I sit in that space clearly believing and intending for that to happen, and I can feel a difference vibrationally. If any of you feel like you're unsafe or threatened, and you're not living in a good area, I would really suggest that start working metaphysically in those realms and watch the quality of the energy change in your home, in your room, in your relationships with people. It's a really big deal. It's a big deal. Some of us have no need for learning via the dark forces. On the other hand, because consciousness is raising so quickly and the molecular structure of Earth and everything on her, including us, is speeding up, many people are beyond the need of some help of the dark forces or attachments. Therefore, for some people, they no longer serve a purpose and are ready to be released. It is these individuals who are best served in releasement work. For those who don't believe in the dark forces and believe themselves to be immune to their influence, allow me to shatter that illusion. Denial of the dark ones actually increases their power. Yeah. So it makes it so much easier for the dark forces to influence someone if the person believes his ideas are his own. So the ignorance is bliss thing. Oh, good. Open your awareness and your mind up to all the possibilities of everything that can play out in your life, both light and dark. It seats you in a position of power. And just so you're aware, and I'm explaining to people, this has now becomes part of my journey in terms of learning the work. My own experience of having this done and then coming in and now being taught this. So at some point I will be at that level of ability to be able to start working and assisting others. But I do work as an energetic healer. I am the psychic clairvoyant, and I do work to serve and help and heal other people. So the next part of this is don't be deceived. Another illusion is when people think I meditate, I'm on a spiritual path. I resonate too highly for them to affect me. This is wrong again. The dark angels are very powerful and within their energy field and can tolerate a great amount of light. They can also cloak themselves in light, for those of you who don't know. So they actually can come through as an angel of light and they're actually an angel of darkness. But it takes a tremendous amount of spiritual energy to sustain that. But collectively, they can sustain it longer and more powerfully. So you see the legions come into play. And again, when we spoke about the governmental forces and the hierarchy that play at those levels, have legions of dark angels at play. And that's how they're able to sustain and maintain their influence over the earth plane and the people on the earth plane. As it reminds us in scripture, they can even transform themselves to appear as angels of light to dupe their victims. However, they cannot tolerate this masquerade for very long and will eventually have to return to their darkened state. There are very few incarnate humans whose auras are so pure and who resonate so highly that a dark force cannot live within them. I would personally suggest permitting oneself the luxury, I would personally not suggest permitting oneself the luxury of that particular illusion. Again, what you don't acknowledge and believe in has a greater influence over you. The power is in the realisation, the acknowledgement and the confirmation that these forces and powers do exist. They don't like it, but the more of us that are aware of that, we light up each other person. So can you imagine collectively what we can do working for the light, using alchemy and prayer, projecting positive thought forms towards people in life and everything in life. It's negating these lower vibrational forces and influences. It's part of our spiritual role. You know immediately when you're in contact with something that is quite dark. Your intuition, your feeling, your energy will tell you straight away. You can feel it. For those of you, I imagine, are very quite sensitive to all these energies. So the dark is no longer needed. Soon in this particular cycle of Earth's history, dark forces will no longer be permitted. What we're doing now is assisting in that process by releasing them from ourselves and from the Earth. Therefore, many people are ready to have their dark forces removed. And I'm sure you're all sitting here going, wow, how can I get this to happen for me? Well, at some point, I'm hopefully that I will be able to help you and assist you in that. Well, it's my intention to do so. Therefore, many people are ready to have their dark forces removed as they no longer serve any purpose for their growth. Soon they will be released from the entire planet. Group consciousness, as has been stated before, the forces of light, the angels of light, work with the soul, hidden in every form. They are concerned with group purposes and with the founding of the kingdom on earth. I touched on this with a friend the other day in terms of group souls. And when the karmic influences that are placed upon a group soul, not just individually, if they are cleared by an individual within the group, the other individuals within that group do not have to take on that karmic debt. It's cleared for them. So I would encourage you, if you are someone that's gravitates towards soulmates, soul groups, those type of relationships, to investigate a little bit further that there is a responsibility that we have as a collective soul group. And there are many of those at play here on the earth plane as well. So as one of us does the work in clearing and healing within that group of souls, the others within the group do not have to actually do that work. It's cleared for them. They have that same energetic contract and vibration within the collective soul that it's then healed and cleared for them. How wonderful is that, right? The dark forces with whom work with the form side of expression and with the founding of a centre of control that will be theirs entirely, and which will subdue all the living forms and all the kingdoms to their particular behests. It is the old story, familiar in biblical phraseology, of the kingdoms of the world and the kingdom of Christ, and the power of the Antichrist and the power of the Christ. This produced a great climax in Atlantean days, and although the hierarchy of light triumphed, it was only the merest margin. The masters of protection. If this cannot be done, they may then attack the physical bodies of the workers and agents for the hierarchy and seek, through the distress of the physical body, to control the disciples' output. This does not always prove successful, as the master can and often does protect his disciple. The dark forces work through the identification with or the stimulation of the psychic mechanism, so that the lower psychic powers become abnormally developed and prematurely assume proportions that are almost uncontrollable. This is why it can be inadvisable to develop unnaturally what psychic abilities you have. It is much more preferable to allow these abilities to develop in a normal and natural way. Slowly and evenly developed abilities will serve the disciple better than any forced through and under the control of other beings. So that relates back to what I was saying in terms of signing on for a contract with a Dark Lord or Dark Master or a magician on the earth plane. You're basically handing over that control to a dark force that you will then have to serve under when you cross over from the earth plane. You may gain all the power and riches on the earth plane while you're here, but then you'll have to pay all that back. So someone who's very eager to develop clairvoyantly, mediumistically, spiritually as a healer, decides to work under a dark master on the earth plane and is given all those powers very quickly, will then become bankrupt when they cross over spiritually and will have to pay that back, and they almost regress in their spiritual progression, and if not bound in that place, if they do not reclaim that fragment of light, they'll be lost to the light forever. So be aware who comes in to teach you. Look for that integrity always within your teachers. Search for those truths and that light with anyone who's teaching you any spiritual practice. So like I said, this is what can be inadvisable to develop unnaturally. So you allow them to develop in a normal, natural way, slowly, evenly, and not force them under control of other beings. Those who want to hasten their development unfortunately fall prey to the dark forces and even do not know it, like I've just suggested. They consider themselves above everyone else. And the dark brothers can manipulate the person through the ego. These people, in their ignorance, consider themselves well upon the spiritual path. If the person dies prematurely, the shock of what has actually happened is enormous for the person, who is then filled with deep remorse. Excuse me. The light or the light angels. When our consciousness withdraws from our third dimensional conscious waking state and wanders into the astral world, we are meandering in realms which are not overly empowered. In the lower astral realms, where we'll do some of our release work, there are any number of extremely negative beings lurking around the corner that may confront us. As these realms are mainly known to us, our overseers have kindly provided escorts and bodyguards in the forms of angels of light. Not only do these angels take an active part in assisting us with the release of any dark beings and energies, but they also lend us protection through various means. During interdimensional work, they can be seen as observing and standing by, ready to help us if we're not sure of our next step. They literally escort us and stand guard around us, holding us back from any dark forces that may interfere. So how good's that, right? So as we do cross over, we have those guards and those protections. But again, based on our experience here, what we create on this plane, we experience in the spiritual plane. So it calls for each one of us to be really conscious and mindful about everything that we manifest from an emotional level, a mental level, and a physical level. It's point-by-point observation of your complete experience from moment to moment. Each one of us has the influence to be influenced and influence others from one point of one thought, one emotion, one action. And the moment that that deviates from something that feels true and right, from that place of love and that high space within you, I would welcome you to examine that and question where that comes from. Don't fear it, but make a note of what that influence actually is. And if it's something that continually drives you and you can't resolve it, I would suggest that you then take further investigation into possibly actually unpacking some of these forces that are at work in you and around you. The next part I just want to touch on, guys, is some psychic protection, if you're interested. I showed you this book when I was here last. So it's Master Choco Sui. It's Practical Psychic Self-Defense for your home and your office. How many of you people have cactuses? No? Have you cactus? Yeah. So I don't know if you. I used to have this saying back with some of the people that I used to hang out with. We used to say that the cactus is looking pretty cactus. People would look at you and go, "What does that mean?" The needles on a cactus are psychic antenna. All right, and they're tuned to actually absorb vibrational energy, low psychic vibrational energy. And the great thing about cactuses is they can be programmed to actually absorb negative energy around your home or your office. So you often wonder when you meet spiritual people sometimes and they go to their house and they have a plethora of freaking cactuses at the front door. It's like, I don't know, I just really love them. It's like, okay, cool. What's that about? At some level, they're drawn to them because they need that protection, right? So one of the cool things that... Yeah, any cactus, you can program it. I was having a discussion the other day with someone about it, and they programmed their cactus in a very toxic psychic environment for a long time. And they had a feeling that it was about done. And so they took the cactus away, and upon removing it from the pot, it disintegrated. And everything within inside the cactus, even though it appeared alive, was completely dead. It had absorbed and absorbed and absorbed all the psychic energy over the years that its shell, it's inside, it's become a shell. Isn't that interesting? Can you imagine some of the spaces that our bodies go into continuously being hammered by psychic energy? Now we're sort of stepping a little bit aside from the influences that we can have from the other beings that I've just spoken about, and we're just bringing it into the localised area of being around human beings for a moment and psychic energies that we live in every day. And I thought it might be a good idea for you guys that you could take away today just some little examples and ideas of to be mindful about how to be psychically protected, and some different objects that you can use as psychic diversions, and some techniques that you can use as diversionary techniques. How many of you people here would consider yourselves sensitive? Nice. How many highly sensitive? Nice. How many people at the top of the pyramid empathic? Hayoka empathic. Okay, yeah. So right at the peak. So levels of that work through levels of our being. And so as we actually move into environments, we're picking up psychic impressions wherever we go. And a lot of the times we're not aware of what's actually happening, and we can come home feeling very sick. Work environments are common places that we visit, supermarkets, even at home, the neighbours. This can even go to the land. The land can be psychically contaminated. The grid lines, the ley lines, the energetic formwork can be compromised, and again have these portals and these other influences that are at play, as I described with my friend Danny, that then come through the home and influence us and make us sick. So one of the things that I like to use is a cactus. And I don't tell the cactus it's cactus. But what I do is I instruct the cactus. And I do this with intention. I instruct the cactus to absorb all psychic energy, psychic projections, thought forms, psychic emotional attacks, anything negative that is directed at me. I now instruct the cactus to absorb all these psychic energies from me and away from me. So be it, so be it, so it is. There's the command, the intention and the instruction. The vibration of the cactus goes, wow, okay, I know what I'm doing. And it's as simple as that. Another good one we can use is any dark stone. You guys would know about obsidian, black tourmaline. Any dark stone, dark green stones, really powerful to be instructed on the body or at home. I like to use smoky quartz when I read for people, and I instruct that specifically to absorb any negative psychic energy from my sitter. Any thought forms that are projected at me that are harmful, to be immediately absorbed and contained within that crystal. Even though when I'm sitting in front of people reading psychically, I have a gown on, or a robe I should say, will be my next point. Right, I have additional protection that has a role and a function around me energetically that pulls away any negative psychic attack upon me. A lot of the times we can be attacked by people indirectly, and people don't do it purposely. We can be influenced and attacked by people. But again, if you're highly sensitive, like most of you are here, many of you would have gone out to expos, shops, work, coming home feeling ill, pained, unwell, when normally, when you're in good condition, none of this is happening. You've been contaminated psychically. So what happens from there? Do we know? What happens when that happens? We don't know what to do about it. So we build up a repository of psychic energy in our fields. From there, we may have a situation that causes us to become reactive. We get angry, or we use one of the lower vibrations to deal with the overload of psychic energy, and then we create a tear on the webbing of the chakra. Just let me give you a brief example of that. All the chakras have a protective web, like a spider web, and they protect the inner worlds, right? And the inner worlds is where our conscious, subconscious, superconscious lie, our connection to higher self, and the essence of who we are, our light. Once they become compromised, we then get influenced by all the forces that I've just described as well. The ones that are in our fields and the ones that are waiting to step in. So the necessary importance of keeping ourselves psychically clean from that point of being influenced by these other forces, the ones that we have contractually sitting in our field to help us grow, but the ones that are just waiting for the opportunity to step in as well, right, is really important that we keep that integral and protected. The need for psychic protection is very important for highly sensitive people, empathic people and sensitives. And an example of that for me in the past, I had no idea that I was these things. So I was just a playground for these things, overrun by maddening thoughts and emotions and my behaviour and addictions. all had stepped in because I had completely compromised myself energetically. I had no protection. The webbing of my chakras had become damaged and compromised. My inner worlds were affected. I was not Jamie Spooner. I was a shadow of myself, living in the shadows. Funnily enough, this was one of the first books that Spirit guided me to in a bookshop in Adelaide. When I went looking for help, I felt compelled to find this book, and I practiced them. The other things that they talk about in here, this is the auric field around somebody that's really healthy. And you can see all the lines of light that are coming out around the aura. All right, they're called health rays. And from the etheric body out to the first layer, there's rays that stand perpendicular. And when we're healthy and strong and vibrant, they stand up nice and horizontally. When we get sick, they droop. And when they droop, we then have the opportunity to get first physically sick and then emotionally, mentally and spiritually sick. So one of the really good things about going to see a healer is they'll encourage you to self-heal through keeping yourself energetically well and ticking all the boxes. One of the techniques I like to use is called a secondary diversionary technique, and I use Mother Earth for this, bless Mother Earth. Alright, so as any psychic projection, projectile, emotional, mental attack is projected at me, and I'm that sensitive that the moment someone starts thinking very intently about me in the wrong way, I feel it in my solar plexus. It's taken me years to learn what that is, but I now know. So, yeah, but it becomes a really painful thing. And I know that that's what's happening, that someone is projecting a thought projectile at me with that intent and strength to harm me.
And can you tell who it is?
So that's the hard part, even though I'm clairvoyant. But one of the things I've learned to do around that is I keep my world really small. And I look at my interactions for the day or the week and see the people that have come into my sphere of experience and what those exchanges have been like. And then I go from there. I use that as a benchmark. And then I intuitively feel into it. That's the way. I can't get the exact answer, but I intuitively feel. And I usually get really close. But again, being able to go to that person and go, hey, stop psychically attacking me, they're going to go, what are you talking about?
It doesn't work.
No, they're not going to cop to it, one. And two, what's that going to do for me? The lesson is learning how to keep myself integrally whole and safe psychically. So this diversionary technique that you can use is you can instruct your aura to actually use Mother Earth as a diversion. And you root your feet, if you're not aware of that, we have soul chakras. You can visualise the energy from your soles of your feet going into Mother Earth and branching out like a tree, 3 metres, 10 feet into the ground. And from there you can command any psychic attacks that come towards me are to be diverted to Mother Earth. And this will last for a period of 7 days. So be it, so be it, so be it.
Don't you have to do that when you're actually standing on this?
You can stand on the earth, yes. Take your shoes off. But in a case of emergency, you can immediately drop into that space and command the aura and Mother Earth to deal with that energy that way.
What was the command again?
To remove all psychic attacks.
What do you actually say?
Yeah, so I say, Mother Earth, remove all psychic attacks, negative emotional projections at me, all low psychic energy, right? Anything that you can intuitively feel, any thought forms that are attacking me and projecting me, divert them to Mother Earth now. The command at the end is really important to go, so be it, so be it, so it is, because you are setting up that instruction energetically. It's a bit like when you do sort of white witchcraft, you know. They always close the ritual or open the ritual with commands. From the soles of our feet to the crown, they're the 2 points to the universal source connection. That's where we are connected strongest to Mother Earth and to Source.
Yeah.
Is through those 2 points of entry in the body. So one of the other things I'd just like to touch on quickly, and I'll just show you. Some of the things and the ways that people can affect you How many people have been around others where you've been in company with them for 5-10 minutes, half an hour, and you've felt completely drained? Right. Yeah? Like I get it too, right? It's like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to exit here. How can I be polite? Wait for a break in the conversation and go, it was wonderful to meet you, but I need to get out of here. Some of these people that do that, they're called energy vampires, and you've all would have heard of that, right? They have an intrinsic need, and some of the people that are great exhibitors of this are narcissists, right? They hook into your energy and your aura, right? And they will never acknowledge this, or whether they're really particularly aware of it. I like to think narcissists are quite unconscious beings, really. But what they'll do energetically is they'll come in and they'll hook into you. And they'll use all sorts of thought forms and words to project their energy into your auric field and hook you energetically and draw from you the energy that they need. The moment that you drop your guard and respond to that same vibration, you're done. Right, they've got you. So what do we do from there? We're now hooked, we're now being attacked, we're now being drained of all beautiful little sensitive souls in the room, and you're going, oh my God, what do? I feel terrible. So there's a procedure in this that you can use. Alright, and this procedure immediately is actually dropping in, starting to cut and remove the cords. I have a process if anyone's interested, I didn't bring with me today, but you're using the angels in a very specific procedure to cut and release these cords. But one of the quickest ways I've found in dealing with this is dropping mirrors in around you. And I root the mirrors into Mother Earth, and I instruct Mother Earth to absorb these psychic attacks and energies. When we cut the cords, by the way, one of the interesting things with males is that we cord to females through the pubis centre and the heart, and females will cord to us through the solar plexus centre and the pubis centre. So when you have a male that's a narcissistic that's cording and tapping into you, he will primarily send those cords out from those points and connect to you from there. One of the really great things about this is that when we believe in the energy, it's as it is. So what we can imagine it to be, it will be. We are all those metaphysicians in our own right. By cutting and releasing cords, we immediately disconnect the cord and the connection from that attack. From that point, we actually need to cleanse and release the energy that's been connected to us. One of the greatest ways to do this is using a salt bath. One of the quickest ways to do that is a salt bath. Grounding to Mother Earth is another way, standing on Mother Earth and dissipating, commanding the energy out. What I like to do with the mirrors when I drop them in is the mirrors become shields of love and mirror back that light from Michael and the angels. I've found it works really well in disconnecting the energy and raising my vibration so there's no more compatible match. Because again, remember that they can only come in if we have that same vibrational match. And all of us kind of like to think that we're not angry people or jealous, or that we all carry a quality of a lower vibration that can be a point of attraction for someone who wants to project and attack us. One of the things that it speaks about is a closed aura. How many people know about that? So if I'm talking to you and you walk up to me and you've got this really big vibe and you're aggressive and all of that, and I can't fight you, for an example, because you're bigger than me or whatever, or I'm a female, and how do I get out of that space or protect myself energetically from that? You can be very subtle, and then you can be very right up with it. So if you were coming at me, psychically attacking me right here in this space right now, and I didn't like your energy that was projecting to me, one of the things that I've just done is this. That's just pulled my aura in. A subtle movement is from behind. Another one is to completely lock in. Have you ever noticed when people are under attack that they actually immediately draw back and do this? Oh, what's going on? That's subconscious patterning, programming, protective mode. You go, hey, hang on a minute, this isn't energetically right. I've got to protect myself here. This person's like, wham. Alright, so that's one way that we can quite simply use. It's called closing the aura technique. If you're in a situation where you can't immediately get out of and someone's at you that way, subtly cross your legs, your arms, and imagine pulling your aura in closer. The next technique from there is called a glove technique, and you can actually mesh your aura really tight to your body and make it hard like armour. For people that are really intent on actually hurting you, this is a great technique to use. Again, intending it, visualising it, and pulling your aura in closer and closer so it fits like a glove, and seeing it like mesh or the chain mesh of body armour that the knights used to use. That's another really effective way of closing your aura and not leaving it open and susceptible to attacks from people. I don't know how many of you have sat at home and then all of a sudden felt off, or can feel sick or pained, but someone's sitting there very intently thinking not so much good thoughts about who you are. It's pissed off with you and not happy. You know, and all of a sudden you now got to deal with that. It happens every day. We live in a world of psychic energy. We communicate 90%, 95% subconsciously. We are influenced by forces at the subconscious level, energetic level. Predominantly our whole experience is an energetic one, that we're only looking out of life and experiencing life through our eyes at 10%. The rest of it's an energetic exchange. What's the gravity in that? The power in that, to start understanding and living your life with those glasses on and looking through life that way. Being aware of actually really what's happening to you and around you at all times. You know, ultimately we want to strive for peace, inner peace, balance, harmony. You know, we want to be strong creators, we want to show love, we want to influence and be influenced in a way that's going to help us grow. But I feel without the awareness of these things, we are only going to progress so far until that time comes where we will be asked or forced to face these things that are happening in our lives at whatever level is relevant to our evolution and our growth. So one of the things you can do at home is set the cactuses up. At work, you can have the cactus, the crystals as a diversionary object. And whatever you feel intuitively to program the crystal with the energies that are projected at you at work, it could even be from the lights. The harmful EMF energies for sensitive people are shocking. Another form of psychic energy that makes us sick and unwell. The foods that you eat, be very careful about who prepares those foods publicly. I don't know if you're like me, I've gone out and had food and takeaway. It wasn't the food. It was the person behind the counter that was really angry, that was preparing the food, that then puts all that thought form and emotion into the food and serves it up to me on a platter and says, here, have a nice big chunky serving of psychic sickness. Use physical objects that they can take home and play around with, or to work, or in their pocket.
Yeah.
You can use these objects and instruct them to give you the protection that you need from the psychic energy that you're living in every day. How many people go to work or have in their life difficult people they have to deal with every day? Yeah, right? How do you get around that? How many people are really influenced by them when they get home? Emotionally, mentally drained, tired, upset. Right? You've been psychically hooked. We all have the experience of that each day to some degree. How do we deal with that? Then what happens there when we've dropped into that space, guys, is then we have the other forces that are all sitting in our fields like I've described, that then can have a field day with that, and we can be overrun. So the confrontation at work with somebody that just continually psychically gets at me, then decides to trigger a traumatic memory inside of me that goes back lifetimes that I can contractually have from these entities and these dark forces that have influenced me over lifetimes. Now they've stepped in and gone, yeah, here's the party. I'm at full play now because this person has allowed that to happen. The contract's there, the energy's there, it syncs. The outside trigger through someone has been the catalyst, and away we go, party time. Wow, there's the sequence of events that can happen. It does happen. It happened in my life repeatedly, over and over, and I drew more and more and more of these forces and people from those shadows and those realms to me because of those reasons. And I was just an open play day on both sides of the fence. Come in, have a great time, tear me apart. No peace in my life at all. So the thing about this, guys, is being really super aware of what we can do to change that on a day-to-day level. One of the things that this master teaches here is about non-injury, harm and non-injury. And in a situation like you were just describing, right, one of the things that we can do immediately too is project pink light from the heart centre outwards towards them. When working energetically and metaphysically, if we're confronted with someone who's angry or any of those sort of really disrupting emotions or words or thoughts that are projected to us, we can drop into that space immediately and start to project from the heart centre and project out to their heart and all around them. If we're at distance and we know that we're being attacked or influenced, we can then send them unconditional love, forgiving and kindness, seal them in pink, seal them in white, seal them in blue, silver. Ask for that guidance. You'll be given the guidance, and listen, you'll know. For those are the 4 colours I primarily use, and if someone's really intent on getting at me, I use layers. Layers and layers. We go pink, blue, silver, white, and then I step back to me, and the next thing I was just going to discuss quickly is you can chuck a cloak, put a cloak on. So I use a metallic blue cloak, royal blue, very spiritual, very powerful. And I put the cloak on and I can zip it right up, right? And I command and instruct that cloak to deflect all negative psychic energies that I come into contact with each day. Any energies that are projected at me or intended to harm me. So be it, so be it, so be it. 95% of the time I find that works well. If I'm personally connected to someone and they're having a hard time, the stronger my cords are as I develop a relationship with someone, the more energy I'm going to feel from them. As an empath or sensitive, you guys would understand that. We're all emotional beings and we connect at that level primarily with the solar plexus chakra. This is how we exchange our energy and our information from here primarily. We communicate here. So when we get off and we feel anxious or upset or not right, what people in our lives that are closest to us are having that, if they are having that bearing and influence, what do we do there? Cut and remove all negative cords that are connected to this person. Leave the good ones there. Just cut and remove the negative ones. Send those back to the person in light, seal them in light, thank them for the lesson, and then do the work you need to psychically clear, cleanse and heal. What's involved in that vibration when you do feel it is a lesson for you to actually understand what emotional energy that you have that needs to be cleared, integrated and healed. So the moment we feel any discomfort or pain, right, it's showing us there's the point of healing, there's the lesson. If we didn't have that trauma or that vibration in our body, we wouldn't feel it. But there certainly would be another opportunity for us to learn about something else. So today, hopefully that you all have gained some insight from what I've spoken about today in terms of your own personal protection, what you can do straight away in terms of making sure that your energy is clear and clean, places to stay away from, people to stay away from, how to deal with people that are negative, that project at you psychically. They have their own karmic lessons to deal with. And I'd like you all to be mindful that each one of us, even though we can get triggered and upset with situations and people in life, is to try and come back to that centre and always make it about us, not the other person, not to project out psychically and cause that harm, because we'll have to tidy that up karmically. It opens up doors for these other forces that are in play to then step in and influence us as well. And once those forces are really at play in our lives, you'll see that people that have that happening, their lives will fall apart. And it'll be a pretty quick succession. And I'm sure all of you can pinpoint someone in life where you've seen their lives flatline through influences of drugs, alcohol, violence, death at the worst case scenario. This is what goes on in the metaphysical world and the physical world. So the importance of being able to act from that place that you know is your highest, most truthfulest place, the place of your centre, your light, that's the place that you come back to every time. Work from there, because from that place you have the most power, integrity and control over your path of growth and life and progression. And you move from that space outwards. And we will always be tested. And that's part of the journey. So I hope today that some of that's given you a bit more insight into what goes on. Part 2, I have a lot more information that I would like to cover down the track. Hopefully Cheryl, I can come back and even maybe discuss further where I could put this into some content for people where they can have this information, or see me where we can create some type of structure around this for you guys and touching on things just slightly. There's a lot of content that I haven't got to today, but I just felt intuitively that that's what I would like to have opened up for you a little bit more today and talked about. So
Thank you.